Stray is kind of a quaint little thing, as far as games go, but it's also kind of a tricky thing. In this sense, I suppose, you could say that the game is modeled after the identity of its main character, this cat. Despite this, I've come to the conclusion that Stray is not a game about this cat, or this group of cats, or what it is like to be a cat. It might seem like it early on, but truthfully, I don't think Stray has anything to do with cats. Nothing in its world requires a cat. It just so happens that a cat is what we are as we explore a world filled with the remnants of our own. Stray opens with 4 cats on the prowl, en route to something of some kind, and if I can properly superimpose a weapon in post, I can tell you that Stray is my favorite squad-based shooter of this year. Sorry, Space Marine 2, I love you, but you gave me 2 armored blueberries for friends with 2 hearts and 3 lungs apiece, but not a single brain cell between them, and at least these 4 cats interact with each other. Seriously, my goodness, look at them. There's even a dedicated meow button to call out to our friends with. Here, listen to this. We never get to see where these 4 are headed, because in a gravity-based turn of events, this game goes from featuring cats to featuring cat, as we find ourselves alone at the long end of a fall into the deepest part of the subterranean structure that we'd been skirting along the top of. This gives us the first and main objective of the story: survive. Sorry, wrong game. I mean, find a way back out. Our path takes us to a new locale, the Dead City, but despite the ominous name, there are no immediate threats here. And despite perhaps feeling lonely, having been separated from the rest of Delta Squad, it appears that we're not totally alone, because Stray pulls a bit of an ODST in the form of an AI friend who will help us navigate the world. Specifically, they'll help us navigate to them, and after a small game of hide-and-seek with 4 different batteries, we can power up a small section of an old lab and get our new AI friend a little floating body to bop around in. They'll introduce themselves as B12, since that's what the logo on their face reads, and we'll introduce ourselves not at all because we are a cat and cannot speak. I don't think the cat really has a name because there's no one around to give us one, though I have seen members of the community refer to our friend as LCF. Though they mistakenly infer this acronym to mean Little Cat Friend when it in fact stands for Lieutenant Cat Fitzgerald. To be quite clear for a moment, Stray is a remarkably simple game. Do not let that deceive you, because Stray is also a game that borders as near as possible to flawless as any game can. Stray boasts a combination of aesthetic, story, and vibe that are, in relation to the scope and scale of the game, as good as I could ever ask for, and I'm going to just ramble about them for a little while. The story is, as mentioned before, remarkably simple. Get out of the underground city. This objective alone will make you no small number of allies and an equal number of enemies because, you see, we're not the only ones trying to escape the city, and not everyone likes that. There are structures of power in play that require a group to fulfill the role of lesser. Why? Because you see, while this city was once built for humans, even with our kind long a distant memory, these things we made in our image bear our propensity for inequality. These companions that live in the slums are one half of an entirely robotic population that now make up the denizens of the city, and for a long while now, the only lift up to the next level, called Midtown, has been dysfunctional. We know the people of Midtown are doing alright because they still throw their trash down to the lower levels, though they say that that's the proper protocol for recycling, even if they haven't heard from the slums population for a long time. The slums isn't a great place. I mean, by God, it's in the name, but it's a not great place in a deeply human way. The companions that live here have a careful existence, locked on one side by the failing lift upwards and threatened on the other 3 by the Zerks, a nasty sort of creature capable of eating its way through basically anything, cat or companion. Despite this, the slums and its population seems good, in every conceivable sense of that word. As though the natural response to being pushed to the brink is to hold ever tighter to the people around you and embrace that which you still have. In this regard, I have a personal soft spot for Marusk, a musician that you can find in the slums and one who you can help by finding different copies of sheet music scattered around the slums. They play a guitar made seemingly from scrap, a concept that I internalized as perhaps a base desire for music, an expression for creativity and problem solving. A statement about finding beauty in waste. Except, If you make it to Midtown, you can find the same model of guitar locked away in a display case in the back of a clothes shop. That alone feels like a statement, especially considering that Midtown, what with all of the flavors of your standard cyberpunk city, recently installed cameras to spy on companions living at a local housing unit in an attempt to control and harass 3 companions whose hobby seems to be exclusively music. I also don't think it's an accident that one of the main locales of Midtown is a music club that, no matter how long I watched, never actually let a single person in. There are companions on the inside enjoying the music, but these characters are either already inside or restricted from coming inside. Somehow, a 7-hour game about being a cat has laid out the best, most concise thesis for what cyberpunk is and how it feels. You're in, or you're out. And somehow, out always feels better once you've been in. Whether you're in the slums or Midtown, you will notice the shine of neon, a style of lighting that has established itself as perhaps the single greatest visual aesthetic of the cyberpunk genre, and it serves a very cool double feature in Stray depending on your location. In the Midtown, neon plays its standard archetypal role within the genre of being used as a cover to hide the darkness of a world until it is too late to avoid it, but if you prowl around the slums enough, B12 will mention that neon wasn't always a thing in the city. You see, the city is subterranean, enclosed entirely by a massive roof. The city is dark by design, and people began to despair over that darkness until a single person lit up their home with the bright rainbow glow of neon lights. They were taken away, never seen again, having violated their energy cap, but the rest of the city saw hope, followed suit, and there was nothing the authority forces could do against that many people acting in defiance. This is my personal favorite metric by which neon gets its value in a cyberpunk setting. Not as a cover for some dystopic world, but in use to support the base human need to have light, for beauty, to see, as B12 says, the colors of the outside. This neon is not a distraction. It is a deliverance. It is the perfect vibe, a perfect aesthetic, and the people of the slums who still live with this uncorrupted neon, these lights that haven't been co-opted by the enforcers and authorities of Midtown, seem to do well in it. Nearby the slums, however, is what I think my favorite area for the whole game is. Ant Village is small, and you do not spend much time here, which I consider to be an incredible, though required, shame. It is a locale that shares a resemblance to the Firelights village from Arcane, a small community built around a rare tree, though the difference being that here in Stray, nature is not so uncommon. It would seem that the touching of grass is so required for a healthy human mind that the long-gone organic population of the city found a way to breed plants more and more capable of growing in the darkness of the underground, and now with us gone, these plants remain one of the better parts of our legacy, still tended to and cared for by the companions we left behind. It doesn't feel quite right to call Ant Village, or any other part of Stray, by the design of Solarpunk, but I feel like this is more a failing on the part of the modern classification of Solarpunk, rather than any design choices present in Stray. So, with that in mind, I'm going to add to the confusion by insisting that Ant Village is, in fact, the platonic ideal of Solarpunk design and characterization. It is not an area devoid of technology, but rather, it is an area perhaps defined by the perfect application and implementation of technology, exactly as much as the culture and people of Ant Village require, and no more. It is not an area with any lack of plant life or greenery, but instead, it has found a perfect balance and a way to live alongside and in harmony with that nature. Even the water here shows that. Everywhere else throughout the underground, the water is brackish and stale, dripping from the rusted ceilings as the megastructure slowly succumbs to decay, but the water in Ant Village is shaded a rich green because the water is full of life. And sure, you and I won't want to drink this water, but nothing here in Ant Village needs to. This algae-filled water feels like the perfect representation of finding that balance of nature with technology, given that the lone denizens of Ant Village are the robotic companions living in harmony with it. All the design of cyberpunk, but with the vibe of a string light lit back patio on a Friday evening with good company. There isn't much better than that, I think. At the core of every cyberpunk story is the question of what it means to be human. And for a while, here in Stray, we see this human identity worn exclusively through the actions, the words, the existence of the things we left behind in these companions. It is a world devoid of us, but not devoid of our identity. There is music, there is beauty, there is greenery and camaraderie. And at the core of this story, the answer to what does it mean to be human is the need to be free. The main story of the game revolves around the Outsiders, a group of companions formed around the singular dream of seeing the outside, and it is largely in their footsteps that we, along with B12, will follow as we attempt to do the same. And as such, I think it's important to explain them. Momo is the only outsider still in the slums, and that's a placement that they hold with a certain amount of resentment for the rest of the group. Momo was the last to join, and they're the last one where it all started. To them, this means that they've been abandoned, but by collecting the notes left behind by the other outsiders, we can finally help Momo find contact with her old friends by repairing a derelict transceiver on the far side of the slums. And what I love about this is that the moment that Momo learns that they were wrong, that they weren't abandoned, it's like a light switch has been flipped. No resentment, no anger, they're just so happy to know that they weren't actually alone, and that thrill pushes them to be braver than they ever thought they could be, as they help transport you as the cat through the worst parts of the sewer. Bravery overwhelming the Zurks. And even when Momo can't come with, because of the decrepit state of the door to the next zone requiring a manual lift to open, they tell us that they're not going to give up trying to find another way out. Not again. Never. Despite having made contact with the outsider Balthazar, it's actually Doc, another of the group that's closer. You see, the Zurks that plague the slums thrive in darkness, but UV light will obliterate them entirely, so Doc was working on a weapon to combat the Zurks before he went missing. In doing so, he left his son Seamus behind, who now, much like Momo when we first met them, despises the idea of the outside and trying to reach it, believing that those ideals are what took his father from him. But if you can be patient with Seamus, you'll be able to help him find his father's hidden lab and the tracker within it, which, after a quick fix-up, will reveal that Doc is still very much alive and very much nearby and very much devoted to his cause. Most of all, Doc says, he misses his son. But the weapon he was testing malfunctioned and he's been trapped on the far end of the dead end ever since. Helping him to stabilize the weapon means that we are reunion-bound all around, as Doc and Seamus finally get to see each other again and the slums welcome back their old friend. And it is here, in the aforementioned ant village, that we can find Balthazar. Balthazar is unique among the outsiders because they don't really have a story. In fact, as far as I'm aware, they don't ever even leave this spot. Balthazar is simply content. They had a dream, a goal, something that they wanted deeply as a member of the Outsiders, but what they found here in Ant Village was something different, something that was good enough. It seems that in some way, Balthazar came to terms with what they understood to be a hard truth that they wouldn't ever see the surface, so they settled for what they decided was the next best thing. It's a short lesson, but it's an important one. Sometimes things don't work out. That doesn't have to mean that you're lost, though. Clementine is the sole outsider that made it to Midtown, and she carries the most weight, I think, as the outsider that directly opposes the systems of control that we would expect to see from a cyberpunk city. I talked about it briefly earlier, but Midtown is rife with the corruption that tends to follow control in the form of these Sentinels. Once, these Sentinels were designed to protect people, but as life became harder, the Sentinels' grip became firmer. Even now, with humans long gone, these Sentinels are an oppressive force and the main roadblock in Clementine's goal of reaching the surface. And while Balthazar is seemingly content to accept a more realistic reality, Clementine's sole drive has been on finding a way to outsmart and outmaneuver the Sentinels, which you can help her to do by stealing an atomic battery from a corpse factory with intent to use it to power a train station nearby. There's a single working train still that can take us to the control room for the entire city, which Clementine has the keys for. Except by the end of our time in Midtown, the Sentinels are hot on our heels and we're running out of places to run. And so Clementine makes a bold call. She gives you the keys, and all of her trust, as she makes the call to lead the Sentinels away. It is these four, I think, these outsider companions that best summarize the best of humanity in a world totally devoid of its source. Not that we're infallible, but that we can grow, we can learn, we can make mistakes and realize we were wrong. We can find comfort in uncomfortable places, and the strength of our will can move us to things we never thought we could do. That the base human function is to be together and to strive for a world that is better than the one we inherited. A world that, here in Stray, is one without any humans left. Except for the fact that I have been, technically, lying to you. Our friend B12 is not an AI. They are the replicated and digitally preserved consciousness of an old human scientist left alone in their databanks until a lone cat happens along the dead city. And what this means, at least to B12, is that they understand themselves to be the endling of humanity, the last bit of ourselves, the sole bearer of the weight of all of our memories. The entirety of our species weighed solely on and carried entirely by a small droid and its fragile memory components. It is, as B12 understands it, their obligation and responsibility to exist, to see the outside, to carry what is left of us into the sun one last time. And because this is a cyberpunk game, they will not live to see it. The power required to open the roof, to bring light to the dark, to bring freedom to the companions, is more than the components of this little droid can handle, and the circuitry that contains the personality matrix of the last human will not survive the act. But B12 knows this, and they're not afraid, because here at the end of all things, they've realized that they were wrong. That humanity is more than our flesh and our bodies and our memories. It is more than just human because we left it behind when we went away in the way that we shaped nature, in the companions that we created in our own image, and in the way that our desire to be free is fittingly larger than the constraints of our own existence because we taught those things to the things we created, and in doing so, it is these companions that will carry us into eternity. Perhaps humanity is not what we are right now. Perhaps humanity is what we will leave behind after we are gone. Perhaps we still have some time to decide what that means. So, this video was supposed to go live last week because it was supposed to be done before my break, but I just couldn't get it to a place I was happy with before then. And when faced with publishing a lackluster thing that I rushed to get done in time, or publishing a thing that I am happy with, even if it came later, I guess I was in favor of leaving behind, so to say, something I was proud of. At the time of these words, I have 4 incredible executive funders named DaddyBiscuit22, Jordan, DeviceMD, and New Kind of Tired to thank for their help in the production of this video and the support of myself and my channel. These 4, plus everyone else who has ever made the call to put their own skin in the game to act as the foundation of this channel, mean more to me than I could ever express. If you want to get access to my work early, get it ad-free, see your name in the credits, or just join an incredible group of people helping make this content reality, consider following the link and seeing if there's a place for you. Thank you.